Now, I at the time thought that I was in the minority. So I wrote this Great Barrington Declaration to tell the public that there was actually many scientists that had grave concerns about the strategy. Now, in retrospect, I look back and I think, actually, I don't think we were in the minority even then among scientists. I think that Tony Fauci, Francis Collins, another scientist in the UK, Jeremy Farrar, who's head of a funder for a group called the Wellcome Trust that funds many epidemiologists and scientists in the UK. They worked to create an illusion of consensus that didn't exist by marginalizing scientists that disagreed with them, by working with the press and big tech to suppress the voices of scientists who disagreed with them. So when we wrote the Great Barrington Declaration, me, Sunetra Gupta of Oxford University, and Martin Kulldorff of Harvard University, then of Harvard, it posed a big threat because now you have scientists from prominent institutions like Stanford, Harvard, and Oxford saying, no, the lockdown-focused strategy is the wrong way to go. Now you can't automatically say, oh, every reputable scientist agrees with me, if you're Tony Fauci. So it was a huge threat, and he reacted by acting in ways like in entirely inappropriate ways. You already asked me this question about AIDS denialism, which is, it's like a cardinal sin. You're going to get thrown out of the scientific community if you say that, right? Francis Collins wrote a email to Tony Fauci calling the three of us fringe epidemiologists, which I'm going to get put on my business card someday because I think it's such a great term. But we weren't fringe epidemiologists. The set of people, the epidemiologists who control the public discourse, yeah, they disagreed with us. But it's not true that all epidemiologists agreed with them, even at the time. And I think the consensus that they wanted to create, this illusion of consensus they wanted to create, was a false one. And it was false then, and it's false now.
We live in an era of censorship and disinformation, and it can be really hard to know what's true and what's false in this information climate. To get honest information and insights you can trust, join us on Epoch TV. You can sign up for your 14-day free trial at ept.ms/freetrialjan. That's ept.ms/freetrialjan.
Well, so let's look at the lockdown harms. When I first came in, when we first met a year ago, a while ago now, I had this idea that there's pros to the lockdowns and cons to lockdowns, but upon speaking with you, we realized that there don't seem to be as many pros as we had imagined, but a lot of us had been led to believe that, certainly. Now, but let's explore this.
So maybe we can start with why the lockdowns don't work, because I think that's very important, because the allure of the lockdowns is so simple, so compelling, right? If I just keep people apart, surely the disease won't spread to each other. But the problem is that if it works in the context of a computer model, it does not work in the context of real world, right? So let me just give you a data point from India, from Mumbai. It's a city of great inequality. They have slums where people live tightly packed together in not very sanitary circumstances, poor people, large numbers of them, and then you have a high-tech hub where they have all kinds of connections to big tech. It's like a relatively rich part of the city. In July of 2020, there was a seroprevalence study done in Mumbai. Seroprevalence is how many people have antibodies in their blood that indicates that they were infected, have a history of infection. And the slums, residents of the slums of Mumbai had evidence about 60-70% of the population living there had already been infected with COVID and recovered. Much more than people had realized. In the richer parts of Mumbai, something like 20%. This points to the problem with lockdowns. Society is not equal in its ability to comply with an order that says stay home, do nothing, stay safe. Most people can't. Most people living on the earth cannot do that. They have to feed their families. There are legitimate human needs that require connection with other human beings. You get together, of course, for recreation, but even for absolutely essential things like making food, caring for caring for patients, making drugs so that, pharmaceuticals so that people can get treated for other conditions, making sure your electrical lines work, making sure the sewers are running, making sure that energy productions go. There are a whole range of activities that, and I'd say it's impossible for a government to say, well, these activities are essential, these activities are not. An essential activity a non-essential activity, one person, a government bureaucrat, may be quite essential to me. I've talked with pastors, for instance, who tell me that their congregants, many of them, because they were isolated, had suicidal thoughts, and that they needed church, they needed the synagogues, they needed the mosque in order to have the sense of community so that they could live. Is that essential or not essential? How long can you put that off? I don't think it was the place of government to make that distinction, really, to say essential, non-essential. But the reason is simple. It's like you can't actually think of society like a video game. You can't actually think of society where you can just keep people apart from each other, and the only thing that'll happen is germs won't spread. And the inequality in society, the fact that there are so many people that couldn't afford to lock down, automatically meant the lockdowns couldn't work. And that's what happened, right? So the lockdowns were focused protection of the laptop class.
So the premise of the Great Barrington Declaration was focused protection of the most vulnerable. Maybe you can just quickly kind of remind us of that, and then how is what we actually did, the focused protection of the laptop class?
You look at a disease like COVID-19 where it discriminates by age. That's the single most important risk factor. There are other risk factors, but like by far the most important is age. 1,000-fold difference in the risk of mortality from the oldest to the youngest. Well, how would a normal person look at that and react to it? Well, I look at that and I want to protect the people that are at risk, the people that face the highest risk of the disease. That's the old. So focused protection is just the common sense thing where you say, okay, I want to protect the people that are high risk. Here it's the old, some folks with severe chronic conditions that predispose them to have a bad outcome if they were to get sick. That makes, I think, to me, complete sense. We could have poured the resources that we poured into COVID response into protecting the old. We did some, but not nearly enough. Almost 80% of the deaths worldwide, I think, have been people over 65. The world did very poorly, and certainly the United States did very poorly in protecting the old. Instead, what we did is we reorganized society to protect the well-off, the laptop class. It is a trickle-down epidemiology policy we followed. A policy aimed at protecting even people that are relatively low risk. We made it so that Uber drivers deliver food to them. We made it so that they didn't have to leave their house and they could still keep their job. But everyone else, well, you have to go work. You have to go sacrifice for the well-being of this particular class of people. I'll give you one other data point about public health in a paper I published that didn't get a ton of attention. In the early days in the United States of the pandemic, public health had to decide where it would place its testing centers. Remember, in the early days, the pandemic testing was a scarce resource. And it turns out in many places, there was a preference given to rich neighborhoods over poor neighborhoods. That's revealing. Like in the time of great crisis, where do the resources go? Well, it went to protecting the relatively well-off, whether they were truly vulnerable or not. Instead of looking at the disease, looking at who's most vulnerable and seeking to protect them.